You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cricket Podcast. We have a kind of a random show today. We've got a little bit of India news, we've got a little bit of county cricket, and we've got a little bit of England team speculation. I'm Jack Hope. I'm joined by Ross Legg. How are you doing, Ross?
I'm good, thanks. It's very strange not to be doing a live show, so I'm not sure if I'm more on edge or less on edge.
Yeah, I think less. It takes we'll relax into it. It'll get better, Ross. Don't worry. I'm with Max Rowe Brown. How you doing, Max?
Hello. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you, Jack. I'm relieved to not have the pressure of people shouting at us while we're saying things. We won't find out that we're making terrible gaffes until about 2 days after we've done them. So
that is a nice bonus. And we're joined by Nakul Pande. How you doing, Nakul?
Hey Jack, hey Ross, hey Max, how you doing?
Thanks for coming on.
We're all good. Yeah, thanks for coming on, Nakul. Fellas, we're going to talk about India. We're going to talk about England. We're going to talk about county cricket. But before we talk about any of that, Ross, we've got some messages for our listeners and viewers.
We do indeed. We are sponsored by Woodstock Cricket. So if you need a cricket bat, go to theirs. It has instantly turned me into a half-decent batsman this season. So I'm very, very happy with the one I'm using at the moment. First 2 balls I used with it went for 6, so that's you can't get a better endorsement than that strike rate, can you? And you should also follow us at the Cricket Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and like and subscribe on our YouTube channel.
And I will mention that in the show notes you can find a link to our Patreon page if you would like to become a Patreon, and you should. We're still on 6, lads. We've failed to press on to double digits, which is our current target. It's been hard going in the early session of the Patreon test, hasn't it, Max?
yes, but it's coincided with a slight dip in actual cricket happening. So we can blame external factors.
If it's any consolation, on Test debut, Marcus Trescothick took an hour nearly to get off the mark.
There we are. Look, we're the Trescothick of the Patreon cricket podcasting world. Fellas, what do we want to talk about first? We've got like a little agenda. India at the top on the list of news I can see on my screen. Is that a reasonable place to start?
Well, normally we have a question, Jack. We've not done this in so long.
Oh yeah.
We normally open up with a rather stupid question. It's been pretty cold and rainy in England recently. So should we have a question around that, Jack?
Yeah, actually, I forgot to ask. I just briefed everyone that I'd ask a question and I didn't do it. So that's on me, that one. Yeah, it has been cold. Basically, when we play cricket, I bruise my hands every time we play. And I think that's because of the cold weather. So my question to you three, and this can be practical or impractical. How would you improve the game of cricket in cold weather, Ross?
Well, I like the hand warmers, especially the ones you have, because they're kind of discreet. You have them in the old pockets, but nothing can really get away from the fact it's still freezing cold. Like we played when it was raining and it's like 8 degrees, and you just thought, why am I playing cricket? Like we love cricket, clearly, otherwise we wouldn't talk about it all the time. But I think the only solution to that is just don't play in cold weather. Like don't organise fixtures in April. Just try and truncate it into the summer. Or see if you can move to like the Caribbean.
That is a good idea. All cricket in future to be played in the Caribbean. Max, have you got an answer to my question?
Yeah, well, I think actually the great institution of British pubs have kind of paved the way this year. In that, recently all you can do to go to the pub, you have to sit outside, and that's coincided with some fairly bleak and cold weather. And a lot of these pubs have done very well and gone full into the outdoor pub market with various iterations of patio heaters spewing heat into the air and bits of plastic tarpaulin everywhere. So I think all we need to do is just make sure all the groundsmen follow the lead of their local Red Lion or whatever happens to be, and just provide their punters with external warmth. I'm fairly sure it's quite a cost efficient way of doing it and very good for the planet as well. So
is this something like if you're going to have a patio heater at Gully, and if someone hits it on the full, you're out? Like backyard cricket.
Got their own patio heater sort of strapped to their back, like the sort of Ghostbusters proton pack.
Well, perhaps the stumps could be patio heaters as well.
Well, we've heard of
yes.
zing bales. I don't know if I've ever heard of heat emitting bales. Ones you can. I just imagine the wicketkeeper standing up, like that image of sort of striking workers around a bin fire.
Think of all the heat-seeking missile jokes you'd have about people being bowled.
There you go. See, you've got new sledges.
This is a great idea. Well done, Max. Nakul, how would you improve the game of cricket in freezing cold English weather?
I have one. Make sure you're fielding in a busy position. Now that might sound counterintuitive, but the only way to get your hands used to a leather ball hitting it is just to have a leather ball hit it a lot. So field at short mid wicket, field at gully if someone's edging it. Don't field on the boundary. Whatever you do, you don't want that. You don't want a skyer when you've been fielding out at deep square leg for 10 overs. The ball's not come near you because the batters can't hit it off the square. Suddenly there's a skyer in the air. You can't see it properly. Your hands are freezing. Your toes, your feet have gone to sleep. All of this stuff. Also, and I can tell this from a practical point of view, if you are scoring and it is raining, don't try and score with a fountain pen.
There are three good answers. I don't think I can really beat Max's one there, though. To be honest, the patio heater point. It's an absolute romper of an idea, Max. So well done. Do we want to take a quick break, or shall we move on to India straight away, Ross?
Let's plough into India. Let's go then.
Cool. So there's two pieces of news that I think we should discuss. One, India have named their squad for the World Test Championship, and the subsequent tour of England, which starts in June and runs through to the end of September or middle of September. And concurrently, they have decided that they're going to go and play Sri Lanka in a white ball series. And we've joked on this podcast that you could put out a pretty good India B team, or an India B team would be very competitive in international cricket. And we're going to test that theory. Should we start, though, with the test squad, Ross? Because the World Test Championship, if we're being honest, is a little bit more important than a 8-match ODI series against Sri Lanka.
Yeah, okay. So I think for the World Test Championship, I think it's not to be underestimated. Like, India want to win this. It's clear that Virat Kohli holds this very, very high, very close to his heart. So I think New Zealand aren't there by accident either, and they think it's going to be one heck of a game. When it was first announced, I was really disappointed not to see the likes of Hardik Pandya or Padikkal on the list, because they hadn't announced that they were going to Sri Lanka. So there was a bit where I was just like, well, where's the rest of them? Why are some of these players kind of like just left away? So it is good to see kind of them take probably I think it is their strongest side, rather than those two kind of sitting out. In terms of kind of big things from it, it was interesting to see that Ajinkya Rahane's kept the vice captaincy, and I know that a couple of commentators or pundits or kind of professional people on Twitter would come to it and say Rahane was finished and all that kind of stuff, where actually I didn't think there was an alternative option. Nakul, do you think that Rahane's role is kind of cemented in the team for the time being, or is this a really important tour for him where he's going to have to deliver?
Both. Ajinkya Rahane does have a habit of performing very well in difficult conditions, and against good bowling attacks. He scored runs in England before, that 100 at Lords on that green top in 2014, brilliant innings. Did reasonably well in the series in 2018, and it's hard to see why there would be a reasonable case for dropping him as vice captain. He's been vice captain through this World Test Championship cycle. Has done very well when he's had to step up to the captaincy. Is a good, leader if Virat Kohli is off the field, but also is very good in that vice captaincy role because he doesn't want the top job full time. Mm-hmm. And in that time, India have been phenomenally successful. They've lost one Test series, that one in New Zealand. Rahane's come off a brilliant winter in Australia, and then basically wasn't really needed in that series against England in England. I don't really see that there was any pressing need to relieve Ajinkya Rahane of the vice captaincy, and I'm slightly baffled by the thought that anyone thought he might have been relieved of it, to be honest.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Jack, in terms of some of the other players in there, Vihare is. I'm going to say his name wrong. Vihare.
Vihari.
Yeah, yeah.
Hanuma Vihari. Yeah.
Yeah, Anuma Vihari. He's had a stint in the county championship with Warwickshire recently. It's not gone exactly to plan for him, but it's clear that there was a larger plan where he missed out on the IPL. Kind of was a shoe-in for this side. Kind of probably for a backup. Might fit in the middle order, maybe. He's only scored 100 runs in those 3 innings at an average of 16. He can't really use the pitches as being too bad either. Because people hit plenty of runs so far in the county championship. And on debut, he recorded a 23 ball duck. Is there an opportunity to see him in this, or is he going to probably be that kind of backup in the middle order? Because you've got some other people, Rahane in the middle, Agarwal might play, I don't know. And it depends how they fit in the likes of Ashwin, Jadeja, Patel, Sundar. I could go on for all the all-rounders they've got in their list who might well do better than him in that role.
I'd be surprised if we saw him early. I mean, I suspect he was kind of going for the 2019 Marnus Labuschagne, adapt to conditions approach, and then come into the side if there's an opportunity later in the summer. He will need to score more runs to press any kind of a case as the team stands at the moment. I think it's possibly something that you'll see, possibly a slightly larger trend that you'll see, and this won't surprise anyone really, is that some of these Indian batters might struggle a bit more than we're used to in the last 8 to 12 months in English conditions. I think we were sort of saying, I mean, I know like Pant, for example, he has 100 in England, but you do sometimes think the way he bats is possibly exactly how James Anderson and Stuart Broad would like someone to bat against them in English conditions. So Hanuma Vihari, he won't be the first person to come to England and struggle in different conditions. And I think really the story of the summer will be about how many and how well that Indian batting lineup is able to adapt to the English conditions. Because I think their bowling will be all right. I don't think that's going to be as much of a challenge. I think basically, I mean, like, is Rohit Sharma, how much of his home form is he going to be able to replicate in England is the question that I'm most intrigued about seeing answered this summer.
Max, you're the big county championship fan.
So I'm told.
When are we going to see Pujara? That's what the crowd wants to see. We don't want to see him in the IPL. We want to see him in the county championship.
Well, I think he's done that now, hasn't he? He's come to this county championship and ground everyone else into the dirt. So now he needs a new challenge, and that's going to be grinding the England team into the dirt. But I think you talk about Pant maybe being exactly the kind of player that someone like James Anderson might want to bowl at in England. I think Pujara is probably the exact opposite. He's sort of exactly the right player to kind of to sort out those conditions. You know, he knows when to play the ball. He knows when not to play the ball, and more often than not, it is not play the ball. And that's perfect for somewhere where the ball's moving around. So always looking forward to seeing Pujara, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see like a couple of the Indian squad maybe like jump into a county team for a game or two on a short-term basis. I mean, that's what Vihari's done, wasn't he? He was filling in for a late joining South African player whose name escapes me at the current moment. Peter Milan, thank you very much, Nakul. Always good to have a professional on board. So yeah, I mean, there might be a bit of that. We almost got to see Virat Kohli at Surrey very recently, and that was a disappointing to miss out on. So I'd like to see a few, aside from Pujara, a few of the players try and cut their teeth, and that would be overall good for the Indian team, wouldn't it? I mean, on both sides of the aisle, I think the bowlers, we all know that theoretically they should be really dangerous in England with this seam attack, which isn't necessarily something you always would say. And it would be nice to test that theory. And on the flip side, you want to see whether the batsman can stand up to it.
Just on the Pujara point, because I think he's quite a good example of how some Indian players do actually struggle to adapt to English conditions. He averages 29 in England in 9 tests, which for a guy who has obvious talent and obvious ability at the highest level of Test cricket is, pretty poor overall, to be honest.
What tends to happen with Pujara goes uber Pujara in England. He becomes he takes the risk out of his game completely. His game becomes almost entirely about crease occupation in England, even more so than it does in other countries. And we saw the benefit of that in Australia when it tires the bowling attack out and it allows players down the order, in particular Rishabh Pant, to wreak havoc. And that could well be that's a very legitimate tactic. We're all talking as though these pitches are going to be moving around all over the place. That first test doesn't start till August. We've no idea what the pitches are going to be like between now and then, and that is a better time to bat than might be the case. And as Ross was talking about, there is a World Test Championship final in June to happen before that against a very good but very different attack to England earlier in the season. So it does not to cast too far ahead. On Max's point about the county championship stint, they're in England for a long time this summer. There is quite a big gap in between the end of the World Test Championship final and the start of the first test. There's almost 6 weeks, or certainly 5 and a bit weeks. There's a couple of intra-squad games. They were going to be playing India A, but that tour's been cancelled. There'll be some intra-squad games. There is a possibility of maybe some players getting some short-term county championship deals. He says not having the county championship schedule in front of him. So that was obviously that will depend on the scheduling. We've seen Ashwin had a very successful stint at Nottinghamshire. Akshar Patel had a surprisingly successful stint at Durham with bat and ball. Ishant Sharma has credited his stint with Sussex as massively improving him, which he did just before the last tour in 2018. So it is possible that we'll see those guys, or a few of those guys, get some county championship experience just for a game or two basically in July. And then it'll come down to, I think, for both the World Test Championship final and this Test series, it's how up to potential will that bowling attack be. It has taken India a while to get into series in the past, including in England, and it took, for example, I'll take Mohammad Shami as an example. Fantastic bowler, very aggressive, hits the stumps, bowls a little bit fuller, has his immaculate seam position, gets the ball to move. But it took him a couple of tests last time to sort out his line. He was bowling very leg-sidey, he was very expensive, and it wasn't until he clicked that India started becoming a bit more competitive, and that was that was the closest 4-1 of all time, so those margins were very, very fine. It'll be very interesting to see how they go with that. And my suspicion is they'll go in with a 2-spinner, certainly for the World Test Championship final at Southampton, a 2-spinner, 3-seamer attack, which probably means that Vihari misses out. I think there's definitely room to play Ashwin and Jadeja alongside 3-seamers.
Yeah. On the point of kind of the wide squad, so they've got Washington Sundar, Akshar Patel, Jadeja, and Ashwin in there. They've all kind of demonstrated their ability recently. So is it a case where Akshar performed so well against England that he's actually got that left arm spinner spot, or does Jadeja actually walk back into this side because he is Ravi Jadeja?
Akshar's first reserve. First reserve, and he's earned that right. He's jumped Kuldeep Yadav, and who's not even in the squad. But Jadeja is a proper triple threat if you include his unbelievable fielding. He averages close to 50 with the bat in the last few years, and has taken wickets at a better strike rate and economy rate than ever, and just over 20. He could be in a lot of teams. He could be a Test match number 6. And he's certainly a very capable Test match number 7, which Akshar, though he can bat, isn't. So I don't think that, barring injuries, I think that is Jadeja's spot to lose. And if you're going in with one spinner, you could make the argument very convincingly that Jadeja gets that spot above Ashwin.
Yeah, I think there's just a bit where Ashwin still carries the aura around him, especially, I mean, it might not well be against New Zealand, but certainly against England, he has got the rub of the green over some of their players. So we'll see what kind of happens to that front.
On the flip side, Jadeja's a left arm spinner playing against England. So they also, as a breed, have the wool over the England players' eyes to an extent.
I mean, it depends. I mean, there's also... The New Zealand lineup is not with England. You've got potentially Dom Sibley, Rory Burns, and Ben Stokes as left-handers in that top 5 or 6, which could be a matchup. It'll depend how there will be a lot of rotation throughout that 5-test series. I'd be very surprised if any of the seamers and possibly even the spinners on either side play all 5 test matches of that series. But for that New Zealand World Test Championship final, I would expect from this far out, not assuming that everyone's fit, Ashwin and Jadeja to play.
Final point on the India squad. Max, why are they going with the English football registration approach when picking Ridham and Saha? Because they've got better options available. And what they've seemingly done here is pick a third wicketkeeper, well, he's the backup wicketkeeper, but I think KL Rahul's actually better than him. It reminds me of your beloved Chelsea picking Rob Green like a couple of years back when he was like 40 and just in the squad. Where they've got the options they do have, would it not be better an option to start to blood some of the youngsters in here? Or is this just a case of the Sri Lanka tour taking precedence, so the likes of Sanju Samson, Ishan Kishan, even though they're more white ball players, having that opportunity?
I when I looked at the squad, I was puzzled by the presence of Ridham Saha, particularly with the fact that he's recently had COVID and all the rest of it, and it did confuse me. But I think it's that now announcement that they're going to Sri Lanka for those games has answered a number of my questions about the selection. A lot of people were saying, where's Prithvi Shaw? He had one bad series and got dropped. He's started playing well again. He's nowhere to be seen. Also Bhuvi is not there. There was a bit of a question about why Bhuvi wasn't there. They mentioned that he'd had a few injury problems, but he's not the only one in that India squad who's had a few injury problems recently, and we saw what he did to the England team in the white ball series in India. So his absence was a little confusing, but I think you could arguably explain all of those with the presence of a team going to Sri Lanka. I think some of the players you mentioned definitely more white ball oriented so far anyway, and would be really valuable additions to that side. I think Bhuvi has probably got the nod in terms of white ball cricket over Umesh Yadav. He didn't really play in the IPL, and Bhuvi is a proven quantity when it comes to the one dayers, and will provide valuable experience as well. I mean, obviously you can send a bunch of young players, but it's always nice to have a few older heads around as well. So I think that may explain it, but they do seem to persist with it rather a lot, don't they? And I don't know. Surely it's got to stop eventually. How old is he now? 35, 36?
Nakul, do you rate Saha?
I mean, it's very hard to make a case that he's a worse wicketkeeper than KL Rahul. He's a fantastic wicketkeeper. He's one of the very best in the world in terms of pure glove work. He lost his place and allowed Rishabh Pant to retake it through not scoring enough runs. If you're picking a backup wicketkeeper in case Pant gets injured or can't keep for some reason, Ridham Saha has a perfectly adequate replacement with the gloves. The other option that they would have gone with, I think, potentially is KS Bharat, who's been India A's wicketkeeper for a number of years and is a bit younger and has more runs to his name in first class cricket. They haven't gone with that. He would have toured, I think, if India A had come with a full squad. I'm a little bit surprised he's not in the reserve, the standby list, which is only 4 players strong. Abhimanyu Eswaran, a batter, and then 3 fast bowlers. But I don't know whether the Sri Lanka tour was in the selectors' minds when this touring party was announced. I don't know how the chronology works on that, but there is a thing that Ridham Saha is really good at, which makes him a legitimate selection.
Yeah. Okay, Jack, should we talk about the Kiwi squad for a couple of minutes before moving on to the India vs Sri Lanka one?
We can do, but correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't the only news that Trent Boult isn't going to be there for one test? Or is there more to it than that?
so I think if we focus on just the World Test Championship final, because I think
Okay, cool.
we've only got a call for another kind of 15 minutes or so. But in terms of that, so Trent Boult will be back for that World Test Championship. I think when it comes to New Zealand, their player selection pool is rather less than India's. But that is not to say they should be underestimated. They have got a formidable kind of lineup, and them being in, like I said at the top of the show, them being in that World Test Championship final isn't by fluke. They figured out how to play Test cricket in their own kind of brand of style. Do you think that they'll kind of continue with the lineup of kind of Wagner being kind of the enforcer? I mean, Jameson's proven his worth in that team as well. And is it the bowling that is going to get them past India? or is it the batting that is going to make it difficult for them? Where do you think the strength lies when it's in English conditions?
Oh, I think that's again for New Zealand. The big question is how well will their game translate to English conditions? Because they have reached this World Test Championship final by pounding teams at home. They haven't been going on. It's not some all-conquering Kiwi tour of the world. They're just very, very, very good at home and consistently get results there. And they do that by producing pitches that look like they'll be green seamers, but are actually flat as shit. By piling on loads and loads of runs, and then by playing fairly attritional cricket with the ball, using Neil Wagner in long spells, using Jameson kind of for the maybe not similar things, but he obviously with his height he's able to extract something out of these quite flat pitches, and in the first 15-20 overs of the game, they are able to get the Kookaburra ball to swing a little bit as well. I think the key for them will be Trent Boult and how well he is able to adapt to English conditions. Now, you would think the style of bowler he is, he would be ideally suited to sort of playing in England in June. However, sort of as Nakul says, we don't know what the pitch will be like, and we have seen some bowlers for whom the Dukes almost swings a little bit too much. And this seems to affect particularly Australian bowlers. But I can't really see why their Antipodean cousins wouldn't be affected in the same way, given that they're bowling with the same ball. So that's where that's the thing that in my mind that is the question mark for New Zealand. I think, batting wise, both these teams are probably reasonably even. Maybe India have got the slight edge. I think on paper, I would pick the team with Trent Boult if I was going to pick a bowling team for English conditions. But it's really quite finely balanced. I think both teams are good, but both teams also have flaws.
There's an interesting thing with this New Zealand squad. They've named a 20-player squad. Possibly Trent Boult won't be available for the first or second test. This is the test against England, which precede the World Test Championship final. That will then be trimmed to 15, from which they'll pick the playing 11 for the World Test Championship final. The one player I can see from the squad who I think has a chance of breaking into that squad is Devon Conway, who has been ripping it up in domestic cricket in New Zealand for a long time. He's a very experienced player. And he might get his chance against England because Ross Taylor's coming off a hamstring injury that he's suffered. So maybe they'll give him a rest, and Devon Conway will get a chance to maybe, if he makes a really good score or two against England, and then suddenly he becomes an option for the opening slot alongside Tom Latham. But I think it's a good sign that you can name 9 or 10 of the playing 11 for both teams at this stage. A month or more out from the World Test Championship final. Would expect them to go in with the four seamers, with Jameson, Southey, Wagner, and Boult, and then the other option then is: do you go in with a spinner? Given that the Ageas Bowl is the most spin-friendly pitch in England, it is a massive playing area. It's very dry. We've seen a lot of spinners do well here. So do you go with someone like Mitchell Santner, who provides you that all-round option? Do you go with someone like Ajaz Patel, who's a more of a wicket-taking option? Or do you go completely seam and play someone like Colin de Grandhomme as that number 7 and seam bowling option, who is probably a better batter than... I actually quite like Mitchell Santner as a batter. I think he's a pretty decent Test match 7 or 8, but de Grandhomme is probably more capable with the bat. So I think that's really the only two slots that I see being an issue for New Zealand. Tom Blundell's taken to international cricket really well. Henry Nicholls has been in superb form. We know about Kane Williamson. We know he's a world-class player. BJ Watling's a fantastic player. Tom Latham would probably be in a World 11 for openers. And then I think it's an encouraging sign that their bowlers have been so effective, as Jack says, on the flattest pitches in the world. Give them a little bit of seam movement, and as long as they don't, as Jack says, do a Mitchell Starc and get carried away. I'm just using Starc as an example. I think Mohammed Shami and a few others would probably fit into that category of, it's swinging, pitch the ball up really far. No, it doesn't work like that. Actually, there's a really good... Australia in 2019 did a lot of work on deliberately bringing their lengths back 6 inches or so, not floating the ball up there looking for the ball to boomerang and swing, but getting that movement off the seam. and that which makes you a lot more effective throughout the innings. And they've got bowlers who can do that. I think this is going to be, we've got two world-class bowling attacks going up against two good batting lineups with some world-class players in them, in conditions that certainly, again, pitch caveat, we don't know, but batting in England, particularly in the top order, has not been easy in the last few years. It could be an absolute cracker. Really, really looking forward to this test, to this World Test Championship final.
Cool. Fellas, should we take a quick break and then we'll come back with what's been happening in domestic cricket and who might be breaking through from an England point of view?
You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
I think it was a disgraceful performance, and I think it should never be permitted to happen again.
That is very good.